I want to clarify a couple things before we get started. A little bit of misinformation due to reporting that could be more accurate. We are doing these sort of things in every single ward. And the goal wasn't only related to crime, so if you have any other issues tonight, we are happy to address them. Let's try and be respectful, okay? Let's try and be honest with the information, and I will be as honest as humanly possible in sharing some of the challenges we have. More challenging to correct than what is actually happening, and that's part of the issue that we have overall. But that said, we're going to talk a lot about the things that are happening predominantly in the West District, being that I said that we're doing this citywide, and we will publish all the dates in the next few days of the ones that are set up already in the next 4 weeks. So the meetings are all happening in the other wards within the next 4 weeks. So I'm gonna pass this out here. I have 100 copies of it. It should be enough looking at this room. And I'm gonna give you a couple minutes before we continue in the meeting for you to take a look at this stuff and actually have an opportunity to digest some of it that's here. Now I'm gonna walk you through exactly what's here as kind of a baseline. And the only reason I'm providing this is so that you get a baseline understanding of kind of what is exactly happening in your neighborhood. And then from that point, I'm not going to stick to this because it's not as important saying this is up, this is down, this has moved from here, but we could talk more about some of the challenges that we have, some of the things that you see, some of the things that we could be doing productive going forward. Is that fair? Okay. Okay. So if you could take some of these, pass them out, and what they are essentially before you go in is the first page is going to be the CompStat year over year. So you will see 13, 14, 15, every single category broken down. This first page is going to be citywide, okay? The second page is specific to the West District here. So you will get exactly what's happening within the West District over here. The third page is going to be specific to shootings. It's going to break down year over year where we are in shootings, month over month, so you get a real understanding of what's happening in the city, where we trend overall, what some of our challenges are. I'm going to talk to you guys about some of that. And then the last page, which we broke out so you can see, is actual pins on where those shootings happen to be within the West District. Okay? So the best way to start this is, rather than me going through this stuff, which some of it is self-explanatory, is really to address some of your questions ultimately and start to let you guys steer the conversation a little bit on where you think you have specific questions or we can be most helpful. Specifically, if you have recommendations or suggestions, we're open to it. And if it's regarding something as more foot posts or more patrol cars, or hiring more officers, or some of the challenges overall, we're happy to discuss all of that stuff in detail, okay? So, again, just the parameters are, let's just be honest with where we are, and also, let's be respectful. Okay, so I wanted to, his question was specifically around the shootings that were related to gangs and drugs specifically within this subset, is that correct?
Well, Mayor, I'm glad you had the gangs. I'm separating all three.
Okay.
Gangs, gun trafficking, and drug trafficking.
Yep. Okay. So it really opens up a really good conversation over here, which I'll share with you with one of the largest challenges that we have as a police department.
Being honest,
yep.
2 of them are family members.
Yep. Yep.
My family.
Yep. I don't know which ones were those within this.
No, I don't
okay.
want you to deal with that. But
okay.
Some of us
Thank
are
you.
here. Some of us are here as directly related.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So we had an increase at the end of last year, and it was generally regarding specific gangs going back and forth. And sometimes what triggers that is an individual that gets out of jail. There was an individual, for example, that got out of jail, and he was a known shooter in Jersey City. He was a situation, just to give you an added perspective on things that generally don't get shared in the media, but we're going to be talking openly about this. When he did get released, it was notified to the officers in that district that a known shooter was released. So I want you to understand that dynamic. When people are going back and forth on this shooting, What we try to be is somewhat balanced between factual and respectful, regardless of the situation, because somebody is deceased, and that person has a mother, that person has a father, and that person has a family. Part of the challenge that we have is that none of these people, or most of these people, it is not the first time that they were incarcerated, and generally not incarcerated for small things. So I will give you an example, a specific example without giving an individual's name, so you understand kind of some of the challenges that we're dealing. One of the individuals who was shot in the back and forth during that time between October and November, if you look at his rap sheet, he had 7 previous gun charges, meaning that the Jersey City Police Department has arrested this individual 7 previous times for carrying a gun. Now, I know that when the newspapers come out, or when they're shooting back and forth on this sort of thing, ultimately we are to blame, and people say it's the police department ultimately to blame. However, and we have had this conversation, and I'll tell you what we're doing to change it, but we've had this conversation with the prosecutors and the court system, because that day the conversation was, at what point does the person not get out again? Okay? 7 gun charges. So I want you to think about how terrifying it must be for that police officer who must run a plate on a car knowing that that guy's been incarcerated 7 previous times for gun charges, and his job is to approach that window. Now let me tell you why those charges aren't necessarily sticking previously. Because there is a shared responsibility in this. This is just the facts of life. And it's not something that is specific to Jersey City. This is a nationwide problem ultimately. So here's what we're seeing ultimately, okay? We are seeing that if there is shooting back and forth, okay, we will see on CCTV cameras that there are witnesses. We will see that. However, we will also see that none of those witnesses from the community want to participate for a variety of reasons why they don't want to come forward and say, yes, that was the individual shooting. That puts us in a very tough position, and you guys may not realize it, but it does, because in society today, if you have a police officer accusing an individual, even out of gun charges, but no witnesses coming forward, it is very, very hard to get a jury conviction. This is a fact of life on where we are today. Absent of that sort of situation, those charges get pled down quite frequently, and then the individual is out, and then retaliation comes back and forth. And that cycle is very hard to break without the community being part of it. And that is a challenge that is an ongoing thing for not just Jersey City, although we experience it day in and day out. And that's something where there's a shared responsibility between the community being a part of actually saying to us, this is an individual and I'm willing to testify. Now the challenge on that is that sometimes that's scary, right? And I could appreciate that component on it. But both of them need to work together ultimately, and that's why we try to build trust ultimately within the police department. Yes?
Hi, Mayor. Denise Wilkerson. My brother was murdered several years ago, and we were looking for people to do the very same thing that you're talking about. And what we discovered was that they were afraid to.
Yep.
They would come to us with information, we would share it with the police, but there's not much more the police or we could do.
Yep.
And so what I guess we should be doing perhaps is to make it information available to let people know that, okay, you can share information confidentially, and if need be, if things get that ugly, maybe there's some witness protection programs or something of that sort that perhaps they're not aware of and they're afraid to do it. So I'm on both sides of that coin. Yep. I wanted that information to be shared, but I also saw those people being afraid. And so maybe perhaps information on how they can be protected will increase people coming forward.
So can you hear what her comments in the back over there? Her comments were that she had a family member that was in this exact situation, that was murdered, and she was looking for people to come forward, and she experienced the same exact thing that I just mentioned. And she understands both sides of it, is what she was saying, because people were scared. And her recommendation was regarding the tip line and how we handle that. And we're looking at that, how to improve that so it is more anonymous and there's a larger comfort level with the community in trusting the fact that when somebody calls in, it is anonymous today, and we go through precautions to make sure that you feel that way, although we're looking for two things right now on our side that we're doing. Number one, we are trying to incentivize people. Other cities have done it with monetarily incentivizing people to get in tip lines if it leads to a gun arrest. And the other component is extra security that we are working on now. The other thing I do want to say is that the new prosecutor, so I touched on some of the challenges that we have. I don't want you to think that that component is hopeless ultimately without the community. When you look at the Jersey Journal and you see a shooting, or you see somebody essentially getting murdered, or back and forth sort of activity like this, what you are seeing though that is different, and many of you may not even notice it ultimately at the bottom of those articles, is that the prosecutor, we have a new prosecutor that was sworn in at the end of last year. She is terrific, and she is working with us to set those bails significantly higher. You are seeing $750,000 bails, $500,000 cash bails. You will see that at the bottom of the papers for the first time in a long time, and that is important because some of these people make the decision then whether to post the $75,000, 10% of the $750,000 bails, or spend that money on lawyers. Ultimately, they make the decision to spend the money on lawyers, which means that you will not see them for a little while. That's part of the kind of the issue that we're going through right now. This is some information on the tip line ultimately. So we will get some of that stuff out to you, and we'll go from there. So some questions over there. Yes?
To speak to, I mean, you got police officers already. I hear you say you're going to hire more. I'm going to speak from my own personal experience as a drug dealer back in 1992.
Okay.
3. The officers were there. Viola was an officer at the time, so was Schaefer, rest his soul. But the reason they were so successful, they took the time out to know the community. They walked their vicinity, they rode their vicinity, and they sat and talked to Miss Smith, who was raising her grandchildren, and vice versa. So it gave the community more of a safety net to say, well, I know Schaefer's coming around between 3 and 8.
Yeah.
So I can tell him and feel safe because I know then he's going to make sure I'm protected. Or if Lil John is 10 blocks away committing a crime, he then knows that he belongs with Miss Smith. Yep. He knows that he's not a bad child, so he's going to find another way, opposed to just the combat of, or get the F out of here, of what's being done now. And it's not really community policing. Yep. It's one of the problems with the community and the police and why they're not on the same accord. Everybody feels tough. You got the people feeling like this is my city, I don't have to go anywhere. Then you have the officers, I'm doing my job, you have to get out of here. Yep. But it's the way it's being handled. Yep. It's the way it's being handled. I feel like if we have officers for each shift, whether it be 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, there should be someone out there each shift. And granted, overnight, they should be in their patrol cars. Yep. It's dangerous. But we know after 12 o'clock, you can ride through Martin Luther King from McAdoo all the way to Communipaw and run the red lights. Why? There's no police out there at that hour.
Well, you know, seriously, that's right off the bat, a few things. We had way more police officers in 92. We had way more police officers in 1992, when she's talking about when we had more out on the street. Something I can't ignore, we had way more crime. Everybody, I mean, it was the golden, I know people might have felt, but the crime was double what we're having here in Jersey City today.
Because the community was involved.
We are working on getting more police officers out into the street where you want, but it is not as easy to do with the less. Now, a couple things have happened in America, and then I'm going to talk about some of the shootings just to tag on to Mayor. But like, the Jersey City PD went from, before any of us were here, from between 11 and 1,200 officers to 800. When the mayor and I took over, it was 770. Every day we were hitting a new all-time low. We have hired 150 plus police officers to get it to 801 right today.
Could I highlight one thing on that real quick before we get into that? So that's important because we started at 770, we've hired 150 police officers, and we're at 801 today, okay? That means that we are barely moving forward despite investing in the police department against retirements. Now, when we inherited the department, we were at 770, and the previous administration closed the police academy. So we're a little bit constrained about where else that we can put our officers for training. There is not a spot available in any of these counties surrounding Jersey City that is available that we have not filled. Every single available spot, Jersey City fills. I assure you of that. That said, a class, the only sizes that we are able to get into those are 40 or 50. And we're working with the Attorney General Office right now, and something that Councilman Bogiano has been a champion for is getting that police academy back online. We had calls on it last week. They're coming up here next week or so. But that is a long process because what we were grandfathered in previously in 2010, once it's closed, it's created new challenges for us going forward. So we are filling those spots. Now, here is the added challenge to filling those spots ultimately, which is something that many in this room can sympathize with, and it touches on something that you touched on earlier. We have made it our mission to make the department reflect the community as a diverse police department, as a diverse community. It's very important to us, and it should be important to you as well. When we inherited the police department in 2013, the number of African American officers in the Jersey City Police Department above the rank of police officer, that's the entry-level position, that's the most basic position, out of almost 800 officers, 770 officers, the number was 1. It wasn't 1%, it was 1. So we have made it our mission to go out and promote and recruit minority officers into the department. If you look at the classes that we are graduating, they reflect better than ever Jersey City. Now, that is a good thing. Let me tell you about the bad thing about that, essentially, is that as we are getting these people, we have an office on MLK with some of our best officers that go out and recruit and follow up, and they're diligent about that, and we're getting better numbers coming in and passing the test. The challenge is we are also seeing a higher attrition rate on day one. So meaning that the minute that some of these individuals get down to boot camp, so to speak, the academy, okay, and the first time that they have an authoritative figure telling them this is what you are going to do, some of those trainees tend to drop out. Okay? And we counsel them at that point and we say, look, you are making a big mistake. It's a $100,000 career for 20 years. It is a good job. It is a profession, although it continues to be a challenge. Once we lose that spot out of the 40 or 45 that Morris County will give us or Passaic County will give us, we cannot come back and fill that spot with somebody else. It is gone. So that is another challenge ultimately that we're going through ultimately in trying to repair and improve some of the police department that we have. On the walking posts, some of you have questions on that. As we speak now, there are 11 walking posts in both the South and the West districts. Go ahead. 13. Okay, 11 to 13. So, although you may not see them, they are out there walking. That is not something that ultimately is a catch-all solution. You have to understand that as we try to increase the police department, the numbers in the police department, which is a mission for us. And you should know that predominantly the number of police officers that we hire, we have shifted them to the South and the West district, disproportionately more than anywhere else, because we know that's where we have a challenge ultimately. That said, it continues to be a challenge to actually hire officers to increase the number of the department. So if you guys got to think this through, and I can share this with you, but if we, let's say hypothetically, put 20 walking posts on a shift. Let's say hypothetically we did that. If there's 20 walking posts on a shift, they're on foot. What would be impacted by that, we could all understand, is response time, because a foot is slower than a car, ultimately. So you have to find a balance that's reasonable. So nobody could ever say, all right, we need more walking posts. There is a reality of the constraints, and then there's a reality that every possible officer that we can hire, we are hiring. You won't be able to find a spot anywhere else. And we are going to working with the Attorney General on broadening that. But that said, those are the parameters so you understand some of the larger challenges that we have as a police department and as a city. Okay. So some of these, the challenges that his question was that it could be a deterrent. Some of these people have grown up in a household where their father went to jail, their uncle went to jail, their grandfather went to jail. They are not scared of going to jail, okay? And that's a reality. We have confiscated in the last year. 2 years ago, we did 180 firearms that we took off the street. These aren't gun buybacks. These are actually finding a gun on a person that was intending to commit a crime. And this year, last year 208 or something. 208. So that number is increasing. To put it into further perspective on how this works and the challenges on this thing is that 3 weeks ago, we had a weekend where we had 12 gun arrests, of which out of the 12 gun arrests, 5 were juveniles, okay? So those sort of things are not going to be deterred because you're having a detector, frankly, you know? And it's like, Kevin could talk to you, for instance, our director of recreation. I mean, he could talk to you all day about all the different recreation programs we have, but some of these kids don't want to do that. That's not the choice that they're making ultimately, and that's the challenge for us.
Bodega is known for running numbers. A lot of illegal activities going on inside of businesses all along the Ave. The question is, since, you know, many years ago you had people investigating, going into different stores, seeing if they were shoddy and everything else like that. Quality of life issues are causing crimes inside of the city. Could the city look into putting an investment into getting people into investigate illegal activities inside of businesses? And could the different departments, human services and everywhere else, can they employ people inside of the community to assist the city in helping with quality of life crimes? And for quality of life crimes such as loitering and things like that, can we create ordinances and continue to enforce things that's on the books to constantly, address these type of issues? Because bottom line is this: you can put people on detail up and down the avenue, and they're still there. Is there ways to do things like, okay, if I fine you and I ticket you, just like if I'm double parked, if I don't pay my ticket, all of a sudden I lose my driver's license. But folks constantly cause mischief and mayhem, and they don't get a fine, they don't get a summons, they don't get a ticket. I guarantee if you do things like what happened inside of New York City Times Square was cleaned up because they got rid of the quality of life issues. If we're going to do something in Jersey City, we're going to have to clean up the community curfews. Now, I would be willing to work with curfew officers at 10 o'clock when people have to be inside of the house. If you employ people from different schools all throughout this city, and you say, I'm on that van, get your behind inside of the house, because Mr. Gatson is right there riding with you. And there will be assist. So the question is, well, how can we further assist? Or like we ask, well, how could the police, what do you want us to do? Give us the venues and the avenues created to find these individuals. There's not enough dialogue about who's wanted or who's doing these things, and you're not trusting us enough to have enough courage to say that person did it. I know that person. Now, as a person who's been educated in Jersey City, I know shooters, and I know people who are actually shooting. If you put that person's face on that, I'll run down there myself, and I'll tell you, that's so-and-so, he lives on this particular address. You got to empower people to actually do it. You got to entrust us with the information.
So Chris, let me address that. So, you're right? Since I got elected, I always stress that. We talked about that. 85% of constituents complain in the ward is quality of life issue. Sitting at the second job, 2 days a week, every day, I'm in the West District, sitting with Captain Kelly and Lieutenant Booters, to talk about how we're going to address issue with more police patrol, more CCTV camera. Over a couple of weeks, speaking with the public safety director and the mayor, we have more foot patrol. You and I spoke last week. I will work with you. You and I are going to come up with a plan, and the brother in the back as well. He came to my office. We're going to sit. We're going to come up with a plan to work together to make sure that we have a game plan in place, and how you guys can work with me and I can work with you as well. Related to get in touch with the mayor, like I said to you last week in the office, once we have that meeting and we needed the mayor there, I will make sure the mayor attend the meeting.
As you know, public housing does not allow any criminal activity. You're out of the building. But that's not the case with affordable housing in Jersey City. In fact, we renewed 2 very large banks and gave them 30 more years, like Salem Lafayette. I mean, that's my tax dollars subsidizing somebody doing a drug activity, and that should not be. We're not policing. We're not making it the same as public housing. You commit a crime, you're out. You're bringing in a lot of affordable housing, and those buildings, you're bringing in criminal activities. And that should be policed in the same way public housing say you're out. And that's not happening with that. And if you're putting in more affordable housing, not one person should have one criminal activity. It is wrong. It's absolutely wrong to bring that into a neighborhood.
So
So do you have specific examples?
One example would be Salem Lafayette. We renewed that in 2013, and is now a total of 66 years of that, and that particular area has a lot of crime there. We renewed the abatement on several buildings on Bergen Avenue. Those buildings there's a lot of crime in those buildings.
So let me answer that. You'll renew a complex like Salem Lafayette because
Yeah.
I think rightfully we assume that not everybody inside the building is doing illegal activity.
But some of those who are should be kicked out.
Don't renew the leases on the people.
There are people in conventional housing that are doing illegal activity. So it's not a blanket, one-size-fits-all. We will renew those because to protect the affordable housing ultimately is why we do it. Now, if you have specific complaints per person or per unit, tell us.
But it should be like public housing, I'm saying. I am not subsidizing a person who's not receiving affordable housing. I am subsidizing the person who is, and those people should not be involved in criminal activity. They should be out.
I will look into what's happening in Salem Lafayette. I can't speak exactly to
something?
Go ahead.
Salem Lafayette, just to touch on, you're absolutely right. What you said is very important because one of the elements that we have in Jersey City that is unique to areas like Bergen and Lexington,
That
South
area.
Lafayette, Marion Gardens, is the bad element actually lives there. So it's not like I could go arrest you and take you out of there and now it's a nice neighborhood. You're going to be released, you go back to live there. What we've had great success with, we started with Bergen Lex. Mr. Knox is the property manager, he took over there. What we've gotten into is we're starting to use and enforce a tool that's available to us called the DORAs, the Drug-Oriented Restraining Orders. That basically means if you're dealing drugs in front of a location, we can get a restraining order similar to a domestic violence restraining order that keeps you from that location. You're in that location, I could just grab you and arrest you for violating the order. Back to Bergen and Lexington, which we've used as our model that we've started. We've started a relationship, most of you know Detective Doris Johnson, she was my previous community officer. She was instrumental in helping start this and we've had great success at Bergen and Lexington. We are working hand in hand with the building management, where any time our narcotics units, our detectives, our officers end up making an arrest, just like you said, there's a troublemaker lives in the building, we get together with the building management, we provide them what they need to seek the evictions. As a police department, we're unable to do that. But Mr. Knox himself has worked tremendously well with us, and we're looking to expand that into Salem Lafayette, into
I just want the mayor to know that when they did the housing on Montgomery Street near the library downtown, and they asked the support of the community, we were told that not one person living in that whole complex there will have a record or be involved in crime. Obviously, that is an absolute lie. Sometime in the 90s, I saw an issue of cops, and it was, Montgomery Street on television, and I was kind of shocked by that, a block away from me. The point of it is, anyone receiving subsidized housing on my dime should not be living there dealing crime. That's a gift. I never got it. That's a gift. So why should anyone being there who is not only is that a bad influence to people living there, but it's not safe for the people in there, the people who are not involved in crime. And I think every one of them should be evicted when their lease is up. I'm sorry. I don't get it.